They literally have not, to this day, successfully and fully prosecuted anyone for the 9/11 attacks. How is that possible? 3,000 people were murdered. If you're a U.S. attorney, your job is to go out and investigate that murder and prosecute people, have a grand jury, hold people accountable, put them in jail. You're telling me that with all of the money that flew in and out of this country connected to the hijackers, there wasn't one bank account, there wasn't one stock trade that you could drill down on and find out that someone had foreknowledge? And if they had foreknowledge, well, how the hell did they have the foreknowledge?
That's the case on 9/11. It's also the case with Charlie Kirk's murder. It was people had foreknowledge because they bragged about it online on X. And those people have not been arrested. I don't know that they've been questioned, by the way. Maybe they have been. I just don't know. I've asked. Can't quite get an answer there. But I know on 9/11, there were stock trades that proved foreknowledge.
Absolutely.
Of the airlines, of the banks, in the buildings that were hit. And the U.S. government said, yeah, we know who did those. We executed those trades. But we were not going to tell you.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Well, what is that?
That's what I'm saying. Like, how unbelievable. And so what happened is when the U.S. government doesn't take it upon itself to have a prosecution, to have an investigation, it's left to the victims' families to hire lawyers and do it on their own. And you're really hamstrung to do that. Like, you're talking about a terrorist attack where all the documents are classified. It's all held by the government. Everything that you need to learn about your case, to build your case, is in the government's hands. And the government refuses to give you that information. And so we're kind of left in this limbo where the U.S. government didn't do its job to prevent the attacks. Then the Department of Justice after 9/11 didn't do its job to prosecute or hold anyone accountable and provide justice to the murdered victims' families. And so the murdered victims' families turned to this civil litigation process, which, if everyone remembers OJ, it was what Nicole Simpson's family had to do. It's kind of a shitty second. It's really not helpful. And so that's what we were relegated to. And then those attorneys, not all of them, but many of them, were just unwilling. First of all, they were unwilling to sue the U.S. government. And I asked. I've got the emails to prove it. And then I asked,
why were they unwilling to sue the U.S. government?
They told us we weren't allowed, which is not true, because in the wake of, the last 20 years, you see the Emmanuel Church family suing, you see the Fort Hood family suing. You are allowed to sue the U.S. government. Our attorneys initially told us that we couldn't. Of course, we were also forced into what the government did, which was the Victims' Compensation Fund, which was retroactively taking away our right to sue by capping liability levels from 9/11. So what happened was 9/11 happens, the towers collapse, the country is worried about being destabilized, the economy is going to crater.
Right. The airlines.
So supposedly Congress swept in, heroically and created the Airline Stabilization Bill. And I don't know how they wrote that bill because it's pretty precise, but yet somehow they wrote it in like 9 days. And in doing so, retroactively capped liability levels for anyone, for the airlines, for the city of New York. Later, like 2 months later, President Bush capped the liability levels for Boeing Airlines. And essentially the widows and kids were left being told, you're not going to be able to sue because there's not enough money to pay you. There were so many people killed. There's just not enough money. So you're going to have to go into this Victims' Compensation Fund run by this special master, and you'll be paid an amount of money and it's no fault, and go away. And, as an American citizen, a lawyer, I was like, wait a minute, you're not allowed to take away someone's right to sue after the murder. Like, that's not how it works. And yet we weren't given a choice. It was shoved down our throats. And so that's what we were left with.
And the legislation that created this was written in 9 days? Like
9 days.
So
and it's pretty comprehensive.
You're a lawyer, as you just said. How hard would it be to write? So you can take the first 3 days off because it's right after 9/11. The country's in chaos.
I don't know. Condi Rice, immediately after 9/11, is sitting with the National Security Council. And I was like, how can we capitalize on this opportunity? So
she said that?
She said that. Capitalize on this opportunity.
It's so evil.
The pile was still burning. And how can we capitalize on this opportunity? My head split in half when I read that quote. Literally. I just was
She's been rewarded. She runs Hoover. close friend of Philip Zelikows.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
so my point is, we were not allowed to, like, first of all, the U.S. government did nothing. We were relegated to this fund that was quote unquote no fault. There was going to be no trials, no investigation, no hearing, no discovery, no cross-examination, no jury. And so what we were allowed to do was to sue the co-conspirators. But again, the U.S. government didn't go after any quote unquote co-conspirators. They threw them all down at Guantanamo and waterboarded them, tortured them. So there's no, going after them, right? And so we were left with the civil litigation system. Lawyers, many of whom were like aviation attorneys. One group is former big tobacco attorneys. And they were willing to go after the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the rest of these entities, whether it was a foreign government, Emirates, Pakistan, or the U.S. government, we were told no can do.
What about Israel?
Oh, that would have never come up.
Why?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, to me, when you're not asking very, pragmatic, obvious questions and people don't even ask the question, or if you do ask the question, you just sort of get shut down. To me, that makes me suspicious, right? Like, why aren't we going after those countries? Why isn't my country looking into those countries and what they knew? And yet there's never been an interest. And I think that that's suspicious.
Well, by definition. I mean, science and law enforcement have one thing in common. Every possibility has to be considered, maybe immediately discarded. But if you don't consider a possibility, then you're clearly not working to get the truth. Right.
You're not doing your job.
You're covering something up, not trying to illuminate it. Again, by definition. I can't let this pass. I don't want to forget to ask you about it. At the outset of our conversation, you said not only did the U.S. government fail to protect the country, prima facie, but they did nothing to mitigate the effects of the crime once it happened? Something like that. What does that mean?
Right. So not only did they fail to prevent the attacks from happening, which Tom Keane, commissioner of the chairman of the 9/11 Commission, clearly said, the 9/11 attacks 100% could have and should have been prevented. There was enough information in the pipeline for it to be stopped on a number of occasions. It's not just like one instance, several instances where the plot could have been unraveled, stopped, 3,000 lives saved, okay? Or at least the attack delayed in enough time to learn more and really stop the ultimate attack. That's number one. But on the day of 9/11, the U.S. government did absolutely nothing in a defensive posture to mitigate the damage of the attacks. What does that mean? First and foremost, my husband was on the 94th floor of the second tower. He called me after the first building was hit. And he's like, I don't want you to worry. It's not my building. Don't worry. And I said, what's going on? I'm truncating the story. And he said, they're telling us to stay at our desks. Well, an elevator in the World Trade Center went to top to bottom in a minute's time. If at 8:58, the Port Authority and the companies didn't tell people like my husband to stay at their desks and told them to evacuate, those people would have gotten below the zone of impact and survived in the second tower. In my opinion, there is no excuse for any loss of life in the second building. And in the first building, the only loss of life should have been above the impact zone, okay? That's one way that lives could have been saved and damage could have been mitigated. Number two, Christy Todd Whitman told the rescue workers, all of New York, that the air was safe to breathe. We were told early on when people caught, that we were, the Jersey girls were fighting and trying to get the truth. We were told that the sniffers that were put around ground zero, they're supposed to be at a certain height above the ground to sniff the air. They were above the point where they were supposed to be, so that the air that they were testing wasn't the actual air that people were breathing. Okay. Another prime example, the air was not safe to breathe. I don't know what was used in those attacks, but I know that it's caused a lot of cancer. Okay. But
I think that's pretty much proven at this point.
I think it's pretty much proven. And so when the U.S. government goes and tells thousands of people, I think at this point there's 70,000, that the air was safe to breathe, they're responsible for that. All of those people have been injured and harmed. Some of them have died since then. That is an example of devastation, illness, disease that could have been stopped, might not have even ever happened if the U.S. government did its job.
As important as it is, politics is not the answer to this country's or man's greatest problem. The only solution is Jesus. Sorry, that's true. At its core, politics is a process of critiquing other people and getting them to change. Christianity is the opposite. Christianity begins with a call for you to change, me to change. It's called repentance, and it brings you back to God. When God is at the center, hearts change. Only that will lead to the end of abortion, the greatest atrocity this country's ever participated in. The normalizing of killing babies is a stain on this country. Our friends at Preborn are doing everything they can to stop it by providing free ultrasounds to pregnant women. Preborn has rescued over 380,000 children. Now, there are a lot of nonprofits out there. A lot of them call themselves pro-life. I wouldn't trust all of them. Sorry. I do trust Preborn. I know them well. What they do works. Once a mother hears her child's heartbeat for the first time, she becomes twice as likely to have the baby. The ultrasound saves lives. It's $28 for you to sponsor an ultrasound and join Preborn's movement. Just call pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 keyword baby, or pull it up at preborn.com/Tucker. That's preborn.com/Tucker. Defend the preborn. There's nothing more worth it. We hope you'll join us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.